This is Michael Popok. It's After Dark. Do you know where your Legal AF is? On the Legal AF podcast, we talked about the terrible week that Donald Trump just had, particularly in his New York criminal case, where he's tried every which way to get out from under sentencing of his 34-count felony conviction in front of Judge Merchan. He's run off to federal court. He's run off to a federal appellate court. He's filed motions with the judge. What did the judge do about it? Why did the judge delay sentencing until 2 days before Thanksgiving? What does that do to the federal cases that Donald Trump has brought in the same matter? How does that impact his trying to use federal courts and federal appellate courts and federal Supreme Court to stop his sentencing outright? We break it all down for you on Legal AF. Take a listen.
I want to go and have the chat with you about what went down in the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case. There were all these different machinations this week and in the past 10 days, right? The sentencing was scheduled for September 18th. The headline is Justice Merchan adjourned the date, meaning it's not going to be September 18th anymore. It's going to be moved to November after the election. And Justice Merchan explicitly says he's moving it because of the election and it's too close to the election. But here are just some of the maneuvering that was done. Donald Trump tried to remove the case to federal court before Judge Alvin Hellerstein, who was previously assigned the case when Donald Trump tried to remove the case for the first time back in 2023 in July, and it was rejected by Hellerstein in July of 2023. That's why that's the judge. When Trump tried it again, it went to Judge Alvin Hellerstein. First, he denied it on a technical ground. Donald Trump did not attach the certificate that was required to show that the judge gave consent and found a good cause for the removal, and the district attorney never gave consent or an agreement to remove it to federal court. Trump cured the technical defect, and then very swiftly thereafter, Judge Hellerstein said, well, you've now cleared the technical defect, but you haven't shown good cause. Denied. You can't remove the state case to federal court. I'm bringing this up because Trump's whole plan of moving this to federal court was all about delaying the sentencing and removing it from Justice Merchan. So the fact that Justice Merchan has moved the sentencing date not necessarily makes it fully moot what Trump was trying to do with these removals, but I'm trying to let you know what the strategy was here. So then Donald Trump tries to ask Judge Hellerstein to stay all of the proceedings, federal and state, while Donald Trump appeals to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge Hellerstein rejects that. Then Donald Trump goes to the Second Circuit to request emergency expedited hearing from the Court of Appeals. It would be a different panel than the panel, because different panels get randomly assigned to cases. So it would be a different panel than the panel we just discussed that heard the E. Jean Carroll case, but it's that same appellate court, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, because they oversee New York federal court. So there's that going on. And then on Friday, Justice Merchan made the ruling adjourning the sentencing. And like Justice Merchan said in this, I asked the parties' positions. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office kind of punted, and they claimed they were taking no position. But by acknowledging that Donald Trump, because these issues that are still before the court, because Trump is raising the issue of absolute immunity based on what the Supreme Court recently decided in creating a new law, this absolute immunity doctrine, that Trump could take an interlocutory appeal, meaning an immediate emergency appeal to the state appellate division, not the federal, the state appellate, that would automatically stay the sentencing anyway. And so if I, Justice Merchan, were to say, I'm going to have to rule on Trump's absolute immunity argument, and if you want me to, try to organize my docket and continue the hearing on the sentencing, say by a week or two, well, then that's going to be pushing my sentencing literally right against the election. And given these unprecedented times, Justice Merchan said, I don't even want there to be an appearance of politicization, even though there is none. All of the accusations are frivolous. I don't even want an appearance of that. So I'm going to go and make a ruling on the issue of absolute immunity in November, and then shortly thereafter, specifically November 12th. And then on November 26th, there will be sentencing taking place. That's what Justice Merchan ruled. Meanwhile, you still have this Second Circuit Court of Appeal in the federal system now going to be hearing Donald Trump's issues about removing it to federal court. But it's less, I think, significant in the sense of there's no sentencing before the election. I'll give you my take, then pass it to you. Again, Popok, I mean, I'm thinking here that this is, it feels like he was a little bit bullied in my view. And you may think he's being strategic, but, I think they went after his daughter. They subpoenaed the daughter. They sued him. They sued the daughter, all the MAGAs, the House MAGAs, the Trumps, they put her photo out there, and then when the district attorney's office did not take a definitive position,
well, that's
because they even had to acknowledge that Trump would now, because of the Supreme Court, that Trump would still have this interlocutory right. Justice Merchan's like, don't put this on me. You didn't take a position, DA. I'm going to push this out until after the election.
I thought that was the driver of the decision. I'll give you a couple of quotes from the letter that I think support that theory. And I want to ask Karen, when she's on with me at midweek, about why we didn't really get into the nitty gritty. Now that we see it was such a driver of the decision by Judge Merchan to postpone. Well, I don't think at the end, though, this is the strategic part, or the hopium or the popacium or whatever we like to call it here. I don't think this is helpful at all to Donald Trump. And I know the corporate media was like, resounding win for Donald Trump in delay of sentence. It's not that delayed. And it's still going to be, yes, it's after the election, but it's before the inauguration. And it leaves a overhang, which I'll go over, a shadow over him. One of the reasons that you want quick dispatch of jury verdicts in a public justice system and sentencing is that so people don't fill the vacuum with thoughts of that are worse than the actual event. I mean, people could be thinking, oh, he's going away for 10 years. And, Merchan, although I think this indicates he's going to sentence him to jail, I also think that's the indicator here for some jail period of time, and maybe a year or two in jail doesn't matter to people when they're voting on the MAGA and the right wing side. But maybe it does. I don't think he did him any great favors. I think he cut off some avenues of appeal between now and then. At the end of the day, by also postponing and kicking the can on the immunity decision. Here's a couple of highlights from the letter that I thought, for me, were pertinent to my analysis. Firstly, it was the judge, as you said, saying, don't put this on me. If the Manhattan DA thought there was compelling reasons for me to sentence now, then they should have told me that. And because they haven't, it makes my job a lot easier. Then I can just factor in all of these other things. And I think with the maelstrom of things that the judge is, I don't know about the bullying part, but certainly the attacks on him and his ethics, coupled with the notice of removal getting filed and an appeal being taken at or around the very same time, the recognition that the 2 days between the original immunity decision, which was supposed to come out on September 16th, and the sentencing on the 18th may not have been sufficient amount of time, although set by Judge Merchan, to allow for the obvious appeal that Donald Trump might have been taking. And then basically, what's the rush if the Manhattan DA doesn't think there's a rush? The judge tied two things together. He said, I have to sentence under New York law, under the criminal procedure law, CPL. I have to sentence without undue delay. But that comes after I've made the decision about immunity. So if I kick the immunity decision, the pressure on me under the New York criminal law to sentence without undue delay, sort of, I take the pressure off me because I'm now going to postpone immunity decision till the 12th of November, and the 26th. That's going to be a fun time around the Trump Thanksgiving table. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Donald Trump is going to get sentenced. And he also said, Ben, at the end of his order, that Trump's motion to stop the Manhattan DA from filing on the docket their pre-sentencing memo, which is going to be the parade of horribles and the recommendation by the people about how much jail time Donald Trump should get. Right. Like we looked at 300 cases over the last 30 years in which people similarly convicted of similar counts, in this case, 34 of them, of this particular statute got 1 to 4 years and outlining and then listing all the bad things Donald Trump did inside the courtroom, outside the courtroom, in other cases and all of that. They were really worried about that. And the judge denied stopping the people from filing that. He just is going to seal it. So that's the signal. You better get your sentencing memos in. I'm going to protect you from the public for now. It'll be unsealed after I sentence you. That's why I think also in Merchan's mind, he was already leaning towards incarceration. And he thought, you know what, if I'm going to do incarceration and stay it and allow the appeal anyway, because I'm sure that was going to be the 1-2-step move he was going to do, why don't I just, since the Manhattan DA doesn't seem to mind, kick it till after the election. I'll then incarcerate him. And I don't have to stay it, and he can go run off to the appellate court. Here's my 2 favorite lines from the letter. This is how, for those that are joining late into New York practice, this is the way we practice in New York. Judges write letters. They become the orders in the case on stationery. We write letters to the judge, a lot of dear Your Honor or Your Honor kind of letters. And then we get emails from judges about that are major decisions. No other court that I'm practiced in front of does it quite this way. But here's the letter from Judge Merchan, which is actually his order. And here's my favorite part. On page 2, he said, were this court, at the second to last paragraph, were this court to decide after careful consideration of the Supreme Court's decision in Trump that this case should proceed, which he's going to deny the motion for immunity preclusion, it will be faced with one of the most critical and difficult decisions a trial court judge faces. And I leaned in on that one. I was like, oh, here we go. Sentencing a presidential candidate during the middle of an election. No, that's not what he wrote. He said it's one of the most critical decisions. Sentencing of a defendant found guilty of crimes by a unanimous jury of his peers. He's from the Chutkan school. I don't want to hear about the election calendar, nor what the guy in front of me who's been convicted or indicted of crimes, what he does for a living or what he wants to do for a living, i.e. president or wants to be president. All I care about is the fair administration of justice. Same thing here with Judge Merchan, which is I've got the weighty decision of a unanimous conviction and how to sentence that person. And then he goes on to say, towards the end, on the 3rd page of his order, if he's basically earlier lamenting in the decision, I should have just sentenced him in July, which would have avoided the whole timing issue. We're now 40 something days till the trial or whatever it is, but I couldn't because on July 1 there was this immunity decision by the United States Supreme Court that I have to address. I mean, I'm bound by it and how it maps on or applies to this particular case. So I couldn't sentence on the 16th. So I pushed it all off to an appropriate time. Now there's complaints, but the other side, Manhattan DA doesn't seem to be complaining about a further delay. I think it's the smart move by Merchan. I think my boil away of this, my takeaway on this is Judge Merchan knew he's likely to incarcerate Donald Trump or recommend sentence him to incarceration, jail time. He didn't want to do it right now and then stay it and have that be a deciding factor for the electorate before they go into the polls and vote. Since the Manhattan DA didn't oppose it, he's telling everybody, get your sentencing memos in because I am sentencing, because I also think he's going to be denying that motion for immunity preclusion or immunity defense and dismissal on the 12th of November. Very busy November. The only thing is there's going to be this shadow on Donald Trump. He goes into the debate on Tuesday as a convicted felon, as an indicted defendant and multiply indicted defendant who hasn't yet been sentenced, and Kamala can make the argument that he should go away for a long, long time, lock him up in jail, and there's no avenue for appeal in the interim between now and Tuesday or now and even November 5th. It's sort of been cut off by Merchan. One last comment about the federal, the 2-step. Donald Trump tried to jump the tracks, pull the emergency brake on the state court case to stop the sentencing. That, as Ben, I've outlined, has been stopped already, postponed already by the trial judge. But the issue of whether the entire case should get over to the federal judge for a federal judge to make the ultimate decision, which is not what Trump really wants. He doesn't want Judge Hellerstein, who's been terrible for him to date, because he's been applying the law against Donald Trump. He doesn't want Judge Hellerstein, and he doesn't want the Second Circuit Court of Appeals that we talked about earlier, the E. Jean Carroll case. He wants the U.S. Supreme Court to make a decision about their own immunity and this garden variety prosecution that he was on the losing end of. And so it's almost impossible to take it up through the appellate process in state court and then jump the tracks to the Supreme Court. So he's trying to lateral over to the feds, just like Mark Meadows has been trying to do in Georgia, along with the other defendants in Fani Willis's case. And that's going to be up before the Supreme Court this coming term, whether that's allowable or not, out of the 11th Circuit. So that's what we're watching. And with the hearing that's going to be the day of the debate, which again, advantage Kamala Harris, if we're scoring at home, is there's a 3-judge panel. It's Myrna Perez, who before she became a judge was the head of the Voting Rights Project at the Brennan Center, a progressive Democrat, was never a judge before, but is now on the Second Circuit, and she focuses on voting rights. Judge Nathan, who was in Obama's White House as an associate White House counsel working for Obama. So nobody on that panel knows president's immunity and presidential politics better than Judge Nathan, although she just recently got on. And the chief judge of the Second Circuit, who in the past has helped out Donald Trump about his tax returns, but I think she gets outvoted 2-1 by this panel. The only question, and not to get too deep into the weeds, although that's what I think our audience and our Legal AF Patreon people like, is that the question for me is the Tuesday hearing going to be about the merits of the removal or just about the stay? And if it's just about the stay, to round out this segment, I think that's sort of been almost mooted by the fact that the judge has stayed himself. So if they don't take up the merits, which they may not, they may say, we're not the merits panel, we're the stay panel, then I think it's another loss for Donald Trump and the headwinds of that as he goes in to the debate. Last comment on the debate. I know one person who's getting ready for the debate, and her name is Kamala Harris. They're bringing in Anita Dunn and everybody else that's prepped every other candidate for Democrats. She's a prosecutor. You and I do opening statements and closing arguments for a living. I know what that trial binder, that debate binder that she's working from looks like. They've got all the clips of Donald Trump. They got Hillary Clinton, and I'm sure they've watched her debates with Donald Trump 6 ways to Sunday. And Donald Trump is less disciplined, if that's the right term, than he ever was with Hillary Clinton. And they got to find ways to trigger him, and bringing up a losing week at all these different cases by an effective prosecutor in chief in Kamala Harris is one way to do it. Welcome back. Find out why 40 million people already know, which is Legal AF is the home of law and politics on the YouTube dial. We break it down for you just like that. We do it on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on this YouTube channel, and then on audio podcast platforms of your choice. We curate the top 3 or 4 stories at the intersection of law and politics so that you don't have to, and we don't blow smoke or sunshine. We're completely independent without outside investors. Nobody tells me what to say. I don't even know what I'm going to say most times. We're completely unfiltered and unplugged, and you can reach us on Legal AF. If you're part of our audience, we thank you for being there and helping us grow organically and contribute to the 3 million subscribers on the MeidasTouch network. If you don't know about Legal AF, this is Michael Popak making a personal invitation for you to join us Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then on YouTube, and then on any audio podcast platform of your choice. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popak reporting. Heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.